Page 158. Page 158, item 4-7.01, number 1H. An objection has been raised by Delegate McClellan.
The gentleman from Richmond City, Ms. McClellan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Would whoever is responsible for this please yield for a question?
Mr. Speaker, that would be me.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I prefaced my question by first saying I've received a number of calls and emails from state employees who are reacting to information that was sent out by Human Services dealing with wage employees. As I understand, the governor's original budget required that put a cap on the amount of hours that part-time wage employees could work. And my first question is if you could explain the difference between what the committee has done and what the governor's original proposal was.
Mr. Speaker, I'd be glad to. We included over a 12-month period because you might have some seasonal employees, so you'd have an average of so many hours per week over a 12-month period. So that's the main difference, as I understand it.
Mr. Speaker, would the gentleman yield for another question?
Will the gentleman yield?
Yes, sir.
Gentleman yields.
So as I understand the gentleman's explanation, there is still a cap on the number of hours part-time employees can work, but that cap will be judged based on a monthly average rather than a weekly average?
I would say, Mr. Speaker, to the gentlewoman that that is my understanding. The real issue here is that the Affordable Care Act dictated that if you worked a certain number of hours per week, that health care insurance would have to be provided for those employees. So DHRM, Department of Health and Human Resources Management, did an informal survey. They went out to 200-plus agencies. They had about 150 that responded. And what they found was, for example, the Virginia Community College System probably had, I believe it was 1,500 employees that fell in that range. And the number that we were looking at to actually provide this under the ACA, the Affordable Care Act, would have been about $61 million impact annually to the Commonwealth for compliance with the federal legislation that was passed several years ago. So the administration, I think, proactively responded by saying a certain number of hours. And when the DHRM was looking at this, they felt like this language was needed to make it workable so it would be able to be fairly applied, as I understand it.
Mr. Speaker, speaking to the amendment.
The gentleman has the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, the concern that has been raised to me is that we have a number of part-time employees and wage employees in the state who, while they sign up recognizing that they are part-time, they have consistently worked over 40 hours a week. That is mainly because as we have been in our recessionary periods and many of our state agencies were not in a position to hire full-time employees, their workload nevertheless remained enough that they needed people to work what were essentially full-time hours. What this amendment would do is cut those hours back. It'll have two effects. One, on some of those part-time employees who, by working these hours, by cutting these hours, it will affect the amount of money that they will bring home. It will also leave a significant amount of work that will be undone unless we hire more part-time workers or hire more full-time workers. The sense among many of our state employees is they've been asked to do more with less. And some of them have been hired as part-time because we as a Commonwealth, for whatever reason, have not wanted to hire full-time workers and pay the benefits that go along with that. But again, the workload remains the same. And my fear is that this amendment will put a crunch on our state agencies, will put a cap on the hours our employees can work that will affect their take-home pay, just so that we will avoid having to pay health care insurance for them. And therefore, on behalf of those workers, I ask that you reject this amendment.
The gentleman from Portsmouth, Mr. Joanno.
Speaking to the bill.
Gentleman has the floor.
Mr. Chairman, very briefly on this bill, the problem is real simple. The federal government has said under the Federal Care Act, as the gentleman from Suffolk just said, they moved from 30 hours to be part-time to 28 hours a week to be part-time. So what this amendment tries to explain, as the gentleman from Suffolk just explained, is that it's going to be based on a monthly basis, and and therefore will be able to hold down that $61 million in insurance costs that will be coming in that we don't pay for now. And I hope it's a pleasure to the House to pass this amendment.
Shall the committee amendment be agreed to? The clerk will close the roll.
Ayes 73, noes 76.
Oh, actually, it's 26.
26, I apologize.
Ayes 73, noes 26. The amendment is agreed to.